Good morning, everyone. Glad to see everyone. Happy faces. Nice. I have Kevin Cunningham here, who is going to tune in from this office. Okay.
Okay.
Who are we missing, Kate?
Jim, who just arrived. So I do believe you've got all the citizens. So you're good to go.
Okay. Well, thanks for everybody for permitting us to reconvene this august group. As Kate stated in her note, there have been some changes that we need to go through with regard to the deployment of these ARPA funds that suggest we need some modifications to the original appropriations and allocation of those funds. And so what I want to do to just kind of kick it off is, Kate, maybe you can summarize sort of what the issues are that have led to this, and then if you've got recommendations as to what we should be doing, that would be good to hear.
Right. So, just trying to pull up my report. I think the biggest thing that we've seen is the estimated cost for the Saltbox Lane project is going to be far, and it exceeds what we have available in the ARPA funding for that project. So that raises the biggest question. And then the Grove and Tilly money, the speed with which we may be able to move on that, also puts that one into question. The other large areas that I think we should revisit are in the human services areas. And Allie is here. With the food insecurity in the nonprofits, those issues seem to have faded. So we have $200,000 between the two things there that we may be able to reallocate. Then we've got other projects that actually do need more funding that are already approved as ARPA projects, such as the website upgrade, the auditorium, the joint and mortar repairs at the Heights Fire Department are ones that could use more funding, and the paddle courts at Weed Beach. So what I did, the spreadsheet I sent you yesterday shows, where we stand, the funds that I think we can take and reallocate, accounts that need more money. And then on the second page, I had gone through projects that I was aware of, some of which are in the budget now, in the fiscal 24 budget, or some things that were requested in the fiscal 24 budget that got pushed to fiscal 25, that maybe we bring them up and fund them out of ARPA now and save a future budget dollars. And then some brand new projects like the garage floor at, not the garage floor we did as part of the Public Works garage renovations, but a different piece of that floor. The PD locker room that we know is going to need to be redone. The retaining wall at the Norton Heights Fire Department that we know needs some work. So I think we need to do a couple things. Some things would be relatively easy that you could make a decision to recommend to the Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance now to say, let's close out those appropriations and reappropriate them here. And other things, I think, we're going to need another meeting or two to make decisions.
Kate, a question for me on the two drainage amounts for Grove and Tilly and Saltbox. I don't recall that we ever said those amounts were going to cover the entire project. I mean, I thought the idea was that would be part of the funding for that, and we'd get the funding from other things. So what you're thinking on that is why we should just strip that out completely?
Well, on the Saltbox Lane, I'm not convinced that we should strip it out completely. I think we need Ed to weigh in here because one, remember, we have to spend the money by the end of 2026. All right. So one of the issues is, can we do all that work by the end of 2026? So in discussions that Ed and I have had about Saltbox Lane, we could probably spend $1 million. What do we have? $1.5 million. We could probably spend that full $1.5 million by the end of 2026.
Assuming we get the approvals and all this goes
Yes.
through with the
Yes.
appropriate speed, but not,
Right.
not guaranteed, but likely.
But Grove Street, maybe not. So Ed is on here. Maybe Ed can weigh in on what the timing is for those projects.
Are you, and I don't know if you can break it down from design and construction, but just looking at those two projects alone, it doesn't appear we'll be able to finish either one of them based on the timeline our consultant has given us to finish construction. So my thought, Kate, was that if anything, maybe set aside some of the funds that we had appropriated just for the design, at least get that paid for, get those done so that we can get a probable cost that is more accurate than what we have right now. That for those two projects, that was my thinking.
Ed, if we did that, how long would that take?
We're looking at 18 months.
For the design? 18
to 21 months for Saltbox, yes.
Okay, so see, one of the other problems we run into is the funds all have to be committed by the end of December 24. So Jen, how strictly do you feel they define committed?
It's not well defined, but if we have contracted for a service, that would qualify as committed. If we have placed an order for materials and we encumbered those funds, that would qualify as committed.
So just saying we're going to do salt drainage,
that's not committed.
Okay, so that's kind of part of the problem that we're running into.
Isn't there another issue that, Jen, you spoke of, which is the Treasury Department is looking to reclaim some of these funds? If committees haven't moved forward, is that still an issue? And if so, can you expand on that?
So it's not Treasury, it's Congress has been looking for ways to claw back funds that are uncommitted. So there was some legislation passed within the last 6 months or so that tried to claw back uncommitted funds, but they weren't savvy enough in the way that they worded it. So because Treasury had already distributed the funds, it didn't qualify with the way that they worded the language in the legislation. But the Government Finance Officer Association, their governmental liaisons in DC have kind of raised the alarm that Congress might come back at a second try at clawing back funds that are uncommitted. So anything that we don't already have a contract on or haven't already placed an order could be susceptible to a clawback. So the sooner we can get contracts and orders in place, the better.
That obviously argues for moving forward with things that we can execute sooner versus later.
Yes.
Correct.
Yes. And that's why the list that I gave on the second page of that Excel file was projects that the majority of them are either in the fiscal 24 budget or they were requested for fiscal 24 and we pushed them to 25. But then there's some others that we know we could move pretty quickly on. So John, would you like me to run through the ones that are appropriated now and that need more money?
Yeah, I'm kind of pondering all this. Why don't you do that? I've got a couple ideas.
Hey, Kate, I don't want to interrupt you, but I just opened up that spreadsheet for the potential projects.
Yep.
Your total at the bottom
doesn't add up.
No. It looks like you only captured half of the list.
Okay. Yeah, it's 2.4.
You may want to do that.
Thank you.
On the potentials, I believe the DPD plate carriers got funded through the alarm fund, so you can strike that one.
Okay.
I have a police commission meeting in a couple minutes, so I'll confirm that with you.
Okay.
but that can come off.
All right. So on the ones right now, the website upgrade, we're moving along, but we have determined that the citizen request function of the that comes with the new website is not as robust as we would like. So I'd like to upgrade that. And that's a cost of about $15,000. Then we had a meeting on Monday. The representatives from the RTM that had been working on the auditorium upgrades, and myself with our consultants who were designing it, and to do all the things that they would like to do to make that room fully functional for hybrid meetings, improve the audio system. That would require about another $50,000. Then there's some alternates that they proposed. And the other thing that to me is important is it would cost us about $10,000 to have the consultants oversee the project, the installation. I would really like that because I don't know what they're, when they talk about pulling wires and stuff, I'm a little lost. So that $80,000 would allow the auditorium to be upgraded, brought into the 21st century with new speakers, new mics at the tables for all the members, a new projector, a built-in projector, and a new screen and monitors so that it'd be fully, if there were to be a hybrid meeting in that room, people would be able to see the speakers who are remote.
So Kate, you're adding 80 to the 90?
I would like to, yes. I realize that's a big number. But I would say that the consultant has worked very well with the members of the representatives from the RTM were Jim Cameron, Mike Wheeler, and Lois Schneider to understand how that meeting room is used, not just for them, but for other boards like planning and zoning. So that's what we're hoping to do. The joint and mortar repair at Newton Heights, we put that out to bid, and we simply didn't have enough money for even the lowest bid. So I'd like to boost that up so that we can put it out to bid again and get that completed successfully. And then the last one that is an existing program, Weed Beach paddle courts. They're needing to do more than they had anticipated because of the location in terms of support for the courts that they're being required to do by planning and zoning. And Pam has estimated at this time that it would be another $20,000 to $30,000.
Hey, is this the opportunity to let you know about a couple projects that I have that need some additional funds?
Absolutely.
Okay. The two bridge projects, Rings End Road and Old Kings Highway South. One of them we have a bid on for Old Kings Highway South. We will need an extra $35,000. We're actually ready to start that project as soon as the funds are available. And the Rings End Road bridge is an additional $110,000. Additional disturbance under those piers that was found, and I need more scour protection, so it's going to cost us more to do that repair now.
Okay, so those are not, okay, I had them as completed. So you need how much more on Rings End Road Bridge?
110, and we're almost.
Okay, so Ed, you have 99 right now, so you need 110 on top of the 99?
That's correct.
Okay.
Old Kings Highway South, I need $35,000.
Okay.
All right. Like I said, Old Kings Highway South, we're actually ready to start construction as soon as I can get the money in place. And Rings End Road Bridge, I have the COP coming, and as soon as we get that, we're going to bid it. About as close as I can get to being committed on those two projects.
Ed, on the Rings End Road Bridge,
Yes, sir.
Does that amount fix the totality of everything we discussed last year?
It is what we found, or the structural engineer has found last year, but we had him do a secondary check of it. That's where we found a little bit more work. We figured, listen, if we're going to be down there and bypassing with water, bypassing the water, we might as well get it all done now. That's so we included that extra work with the permitting request for the DEP and the Army Corps.
Thank you.
Hey, Kate, how much additional money did you need for joint mortar repair?
I estimated 50,000. The bids had come in the $80,000 range. So I padded it because of the time lapse.
So you need an additional 30?
At least 35.
I might be missing a column or something like that. Okay, 35.
I had it shown on the spreadsheet as needing 50.
Okay.
The trailer for the pods and the radios both came in at the initial estimates. The actual delivery of those came in due to supply chain for both of those at double. So I'm probably need another 18 if I want to fulfill that pod thing as well.
And Kevin, does that include all the stuff that goes in the pod?
That's correct. So we could spend up to the 170 and chop a couple things, but literally both of those, the two big ticket items, which is the radios and the trailers, came in at actual double what the initial estimates were.
Just a philosophical point on all this. These funds were really intended to help people recover pandemic-related effects, food insecurity, illness, loss of business, all of that. And we're kind of talking about reallocating these funds to things that aren't really related to that. So in a sense, maybe Congress has a point about trying to reclaim some of these funds that are not being used for that purpose. I'm not saying we shouldn't do that, but just I wanted to log that philosophical point. If we do decide to go ahead and reuse these funds, maybe on the two drainage amounts there, that we should redefine the ARPA funds as being for the design work, which is not trivial money by any means, but we know we'll definitely have that spent by the end of 2026. And then to free up, to say, okay, that then leaves this amount of budget ARPA funds in the budget that we could use for other purposes. And then maybe, Kate, a good idea would be to take that, reallocate it based on this discussion for the amounts that you described, and then let's recirculate that spreadsheet and take a look at kind of what you recommended, unless anybody else has any areas where you think we ought to make adjustments.
Well, I would just say, John, a couple of these things. So specifically the website upgrade, the auditorium upgrades, and the pod. Those are all things that are actually related to what came out of COVID.
Good. Yeah, and my point was a philosophical point, not to any specific expense, but I hear you.
John, to react to that, I'd be hesitant to not fund the human services component of this. I take the point that maybe food insecurity has been abated, but there's still, at least to my knowledge, a massive need for social services in town. And if we don't use any of this money or very little of this money to help support that, then, I think we kind of go counter to what this.
I agree with that point. I guess a question I've had is that I would have thought of all the expenditures on here, that deploying those funds for food insecurity and deserving nonprofits, I would have thought that would have been something we would have done almost immediately. There's so many deserving groups out there that could deploy those funds effectively. And so to see that we've not done that after all this time, I don't really understand that. What am I missing?
Could I speak for a minute?
Absolutely.
I think the original thought was that we would give grants to the various nonprofits that really helped Darien residents during COVID. but then and correct me if I'm wrong, Kate, I think then and I was looking to Kate and Jen for guidance because I've never done those kinds of grant, allocations and whatnot. But Kate, wasn't there something about tracking the money if we do give donations to nonprofits?
Yes, there's complications if we do a sub grant. I see Jen unmuted. Do you want to explain?
No, I was just going to say the same thing, that we have sub grants to other organizations trip us into some monitoring and additional reporting requirements that we're really not equipped to handle.
Okay.
So, we do have quite a bit of money allocated for human service support, like mental health support, the food insecurity, the nonprofits. We could combine them all and look at other things that we could do, but some of it is going to be necessarily temporary in nature. Like we could perhaps contract with a mental health provider and say that we will pay, for some of the services up to a certain dollar amount. But eventually that money, when it ends, will there be a sense that we need to continue that level of support out of town tax dollars? So I'd be happy to have that money stay there and, give us time to think about how we might repurpose it within the social service area.
Can I also make one more comment? So for instance, At Home in Darien, which I'm sure most of you know of, but has been a tremendous help to all of our seniors, and their ridership has been growing. They provide transportation for anyone in Stamford, New Canaan, obviously Darien, Norwalk, and they're looking to hire a third driver and get a third vehicle. I don't know if that's something that we could use from the nonprofit to help them purchase a third vehicle, because it directly helps our Darien residents. And during COVID, they were essential to helping our seniors. I don't know if that's...
Don't you run into the same reporting requirements that impeded us giving away this money before? Or
well, if we were to buy them the new vehicle, it's no.
It's a discrete expenditure, and that's okay.
The problem with buying them the third vehicle is what happens when that vehicle, gets older and needs to be replaced. Do you want to?
Well, then we make it clear it's a one-time donation, and there's not an enduring obligation on our point on our part to replace that. I mean.
And could you do that with the other nonprofits like that we originally thought about? Like, for instance, when we were thinking of the agencies that helped us primarily, we'll say like Child Guidance Center, Family Centers, and Kids in Crisis. Can you, I know you said that then what happens once the money runs out, but can you say it's just a one-time donation, or you? Well,
I mean, it's a good point, but ARPA funds were one time, so recipients should accept that the money they're getting from us is one time. But in a sense, I mean, if it were a worthy nonprofit, I don't see why we couldn't just say, look, these funds are going to you because of the confidence we have in the work that you do and are meant to replenish your coffers post-COVID, right? You guys took a big hit, you spent a ton of money on all this, and I mean, can we not do that?
If we are giving them if we're just giving them money, that does lead to our needing to track what they've done with it.
Okay, fine. All right, understood.
But so maybe the At Home in Darien vehicle, that's a one-time shot.
Yes.
So,
yeah.
And hey, John, when you say we need to track what they do with it, I mean, what do you mean? Kind of, what does that actually mean? Because I know, like, from working with the community fund, they track very carefully what they do with their money and report back to the team and the board. Are we creating kind of a level of paperwork that we're not equipped to handle, or is it's just kind of nettlesome but possible?
I wouldn't say it's meddlesome, but I think it is, it's a level of paperwork that we don't handle now. And maybe if it was funneled to something like the community fund, where we know they are already equipped to handle this stuff and could make it easy, that may be a possibility. But where we have to follow federal rules, the people that we give the money to have to follow those rules, and we would be responsible for making sure that they follow those rules.
Hey, Kate, it's Jim here. Kate, can you clarify, like, if we were to give $1 of ARPA to a 501c, we need to track kind of how they spend it. And
Yeah.
for example, if they didn't spend that dollar by the end of 2026, and we couldn't report that they did, we, the town, would be on the hook to refund that dollar back to the federal government. Is that correct?
I believe so. Jen, what are your thoughts?
I believe so. I'm trying to go through the final rule now to refresh my memory.
Yeah. Jen, I believe we discussed it. So just one thing we as a group need to sort of decide as we're appropriating ARPA dollars, which are different than taxpayer dollars, is that we are underwriting the timing and the manner in which these 501cs may spend the money. And if they don't, we're ultimately on the hook to sort of reimburse the federal government. And then the other thing I would just say, maybe from a policy perspective, I mean, we are fortunate enough to have a significant number of nonprofits in town that help all of our different citizens in a significant and sort of diverse set of ways. I think we need to just think about how we make a decision to sort of allocate funds, whether they be taxpayer or ARPA, to one 501c versus another 501c.
That's a good point.
And I think we went to great lengths to make sure that as we spend tax dollars, like for instance, like, you know, I know the Board of Ed went through it with the YMCA to make sure that those kind of transactions are market and that we're not sort of supporting one of our wonderful 501cs over another one. And then if I could just circle back on all some of these infrastructure needs right here. You know, Kate, I think the spreadsheet you put together was incredibly helpful here to kind of think about what the cadence is of the current projects we've allocated ARPA funds to, and then what the possibilities are to make transfers. I think it might be helpful if you could expand, you know, both the currently appropriated ones and the new ones, just so that we could understand as a committee, when do we think some of these new projects, like for instance, the Norton Heights retaining wall, when could it be designed? When could the first dollar be spent? And when do we think the last dollar can be spent? Because I think part of this whole exercise here is to reallocate funds to make sure we meet the 2024 and 2026 deadlines. So I think understanding, again, the cadences of these underlying potential projects, I think would be helpful.
Okay. That's a good idea.
Yeah, another point would be maybe, as I was saying before, to reduce the drainage budgets down to the design budget.
Mm-hmm.
Take the funds that you've freed up, fund the various projects that we've discussed here, and maybe what you do with the rest of the money is put it in contingency, so that that money's sitting there to the extent these other projects run over budget or there's something else that happens. I'm mindful, though, of Jim's point, which is even the contingency money needs to be spent by those deadlines, so we should pay close attention to that.
Right. So
if I might make, because I was running through this and had some conversations earlier, that I do look that we have those projects that need additional funding. If that's the case, I think that if we get a little more organized, we know what those are. Some of them have been identified. This committee can recommend to move those forward to the Board of Selectmen sooner rather than later to get those done. There's some others that need some adjustment. So I have two questions on the infrastructure. Is first, how much does it cost for the design? And if we're doing the design to get a better number on it, are we then committing that the town is going to eventually move forward with it, assuming based upon costs, through bonding or some other purpose that takes it outside of ARPA? And that's where Jim's point on setting up what the timeframes and the quadrants would be very helpful. On some of these other items that were just potential new ARPA projects and other things like that, some of this stuff, especially stuff that's in the 24 budget, I think is just, let's move it over and make the recommendation. I look at this committee as being an advisory committee. These are Board of Selectmen funds, and essentially that's who got it, the town. And that whatever the committee meets on and decides to move forward should go to the Board of Selectmen. Board of Selectmen approves, and then it goes to the Board of Finance for the authorization of an appropriation, because they will have to be appropriated. But the sooner we can move on some of these low-hanging fruit, so to say, I think that that's something that we should do. There's been a lot of work already done. We know that extra monies are needed, and we should move forward on that while Kate is and Jen are adding additional information for the longer term projects. Just my thoughts.
Do you want to identify the low-hanging fruit, Jack? Are you talking about just the ones that where they've already been appropriated in ARPA money, or are you talking about ones that were? I
think, first of all the ones that have been previously approved, take the 2 bridge repairs, you can add that on. The joint project, add that on. And the other ones that you identified as additionally needed funds. That's the first set of low-hanging fruit. On the potential new ARPA projects, without question, the sweeper and the fire marshal vehicle could move forward, because we're already buying those. The locker room, the fly car, the garage floor, if we have what the true estimate is, all those can go. Landscaping, retaining wall, we're still waiting on some, but those are things we can just move forward on. As to the things that were cut from the 24 budget and pushed into 25, and quite honestly, I'm happy that the police department is being paid out of the police fund, false alarm fund. But I think all of those, we should just say, okay, let's do it. Some of that actually, with the vehicle, at least the sweeper, if we're deciding to do that, we'll change the capital non-recurring expenditures and give contingency back to the Board of Finance in that fund, because it's existing now, and if we're not spending it there, it goes over there, which is always a good thing.
I'm just going to chime in real quick. The sweeper is actually not in the 24 budget. It got pushed to 25.
Yeah, I didn't think it was. I thought that was one of the things that we did cut, and we thought that we could survive for another year with it.
Yeah, hey, Jack, if I could just weigh in, I think a lot of your ideas are great, a great way to kind of think about this. But I think what we as a group should make sure that we don't, I just use the sweeper as an example, right? During the past budget process, I think, Brian, one of our wonderful staff here, I think, put a lot of thought into it with the Board of Selectmen and decided that particular expenditure could be pushed, whether it's pushed 1 year, 2 year, 3 years. So let's just make sure as we allocate these funds, which we do need to by the end of 24, let's make sure we don't sort of kind of cut out what needs to be a very thoughtful decision from the department heads and the Board of Selectmen about, do we need that yet? If we can stretch it for a few more years, and that's what our maintenance guys think, let's not accelerate it just because we need to spend money, because there are a lot of things in Kate's list here that we could allocate the money to.
Jim, I'm in full agreement with you. There, because I did think that was one of the things that Ed pushed to the next year. But yes, the things that are in this year's budget, or we know we're going to have to do the locker room, the garage floor, I see no reason not to move those forward now.
Hey, Ed, the old Kings Highway South pipelining, is that complete?
Yes, it is.
So that $400,000 that is unspent is free and clear to go?
Yeah, I can turn back, Kate. We have 2 warranty items that come due next March. It's part of the project, so it's part of the encumbrance. So I can turn back $395K out of that project.
Okay, so here's what I'm thinking.
And I'll give you the other two that I've already did the math on the other ones too, the two designs I think John had mentioned. If you give me $250 for each one of those designs, that'll include the base design fee, easements, and any legal fees that I may have to incur to get the design complete and finished. So I figured $250 for Saltbox and $250 for Grove Street. Everything else could go back into the pot.
Can I ask a question? Are we, and as a town, not we just follow up in the RTM in this one, but as a town, are we committed for these drainage projects to move forward? Because, and then I'm going to ask, actually, to a certain extent, Jim, because even if we get the cost of what it might be, I'm assuming that we're going to be bonding the rest of it. So I'm interested in what Jim's thoughts on that are.
Can I answer the first part, Jack?
Sure.
The Board of Selectmen has on their agenda for Tuesday to authorize the design development phase for the Saltbox Lane.
Okay.
And then Jim can answer on the...
Yeah, so from my point of view, I think, the town's identified a number of different possible flooding projects. I think, my understanding is we're going to look at sort of all of them. We're going to look at the effectiveness of all of them, the cost of all of them, the timing of all of them. And then I thought decide how we're going to make, decisions to move forward on each or all of them. So I don't want to, obviously it's the Board of Selectmen's process goes first. So we will follow, we'll wait to kind of see how they decide to put these forward and so forth.
Can I just add something there? Personally, I can't imagine not funding a project that is approved by the Board of Selectmen and recommended by the Department of Public Works to enhance the drainage situation in town. How we fund it, we'll have to figure out down the road. Bonding would certainly be a possibility, and not to get ahead of the process, but I can't imagine not recommending personally that we support those projects. I would just, while I have the microphone for a second, I believe we approved the ARPA funding in March of 22. We are approaching 50% of the way through the amount of time we have to actually encumber all of this money. I would suggest that on this call, we approve some projects, not identify a process to approve some projects. I would like to approve what maybe, Kate, you might think is the low-hanging fruit so that we can get this money out the door and get Ed going on whatever he needs to get going and get some of this money encumbered.
I agree. And Dan, thank you for that answer. That's what I was looking for, that the town's thought process is if the Board of Selectmen is recommending flood, that we'll figure out how to get this done.
Okay, I'm just looking at the spreadsheet.
And
what I'm considering low-hanging...
What we're approving are modifications to the list.
Yes.
We've already approved the list. We're approving modifications to the list, right?
Yes. If today you were to approve the additions to the things that are already in the ARPA fund, so that's a total of $338,000 in changes. And then I'd really like to, if we could get the additional landscaping for Highland and the depot, considering all the trees and stuff that were cut down by Eversource, and the two vehicles that are in the fiscal 24 budget. So they've been approved, one for $77,500 and the other for $95,000. That gives us a total of $590,500. That's well within the funds that we can reallocate based on what's in contingency and the items that Ed has said are complete or the balances that he needs to retain.
Okay, quick question. What do you have for the depot? How much money is that?
I put $50,000.
Okay, because Ed and I are working on Eversource doing some work over there. So might not need all that. Right, Ed?
That's correct.
So I think Monica,
in about a week.
To Monica's point, I think we need to move quickly here, and we can move quickly on some things, but let's just make sure we're not sort of appropriating money where there may be money coming from Eversource, or, for example, for a bridge like where we think there's a medium probability where we might be able to get some type of state grant. Again, I mean, time is of the essence here on these projects and to allocate the money, but let's make sure that we, we're not just spending the money if there are other dollars that are available to do that don't come from our taxpayer or from funds.
And so the ones where we can take a little bit more time to get better numbers, because this won't be your last meeting.
Right, and this is just a recommendation, and we don't have any authorization here. I mean, so we're recommending these modifications. The Board of Selectmen can modify that as better information comes along and can send us to the Board of Finance their decision. We're just making a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen.
And Kate, the only other thing I'd really like to throw in there is that garage floor. I have the bids, I have the contractor. I just can't get started on this until I have the funds.
So your 785 is a good number.
Is a good number.
Yeah, I'm for moving that forward. I do have a question on the police department locker room. And I know we took the original amount out of the Board of Finance capital contingency. What's the status on that? And is that 100,000 a good number? And
it's not a number that I would. It's not a number that I would say we're confident in today.
All right. Have we gotten the original design estimates back yet?
No.
All right. When do we anticipate we're getting them?
I can ask Don that.
Okay.
But so if we go with the 338, so that's the website upgrade, the auditorium upgrade, the joint and mortar repair, the 2 bridges, the pod, the paddle courts, $30,000 for landscaping and signage at Highland Farms, fire marshal vehicle, $77,500, the garage floor, the post 53 fly car. We're talking about $1,325,500. Still within. We have about $2.5 million that we can move around.
Yeah, if we're going to deploy that amount of money, there's not enough projects on this list to consume those funds. So we probably need to think about what other things that fit, to Jim's point, within the timeline that we could fund. I think Dan makes an excellent point. We need to make sure, and Jack as well, we need to make sure that we get funding appropriated for the things that can move forward and do that immediately. So at the risk of a trial close, maybe what we do is, Kate, if you could revise the spreadsheet that takes into account all the ideas that we've discussed here, funding the projects that are in need, reserving the amount that we still need to decide what to do with, and then highlighting the things that really should get appropriated quickly. Maybe as a next step, we could get our minds around that sheet and have an action plan come out of that. I don't know. What does everybody think?
I think that's a great idea.
Can we at least, I'd actually like to make a motion that the committee supports moving those forward at the same time Kate and Jen are doing the concurrent plan of reorganizing, so that can get to a Board of Selectmen meeting as soon as possible. And I don't know, it's July, so the Board of Finance should be meeting later on this month before it takes off the August time. But that way everything's appropriated in July and things can start to move forward, especially if Ed already has the bids and the estimates for the 785,000 on the floor. It just makes sense to expedite those things, while the concurrent tasks is going on the other stuff.
Have we seen the actual project overviews and sort of bid breakdowns and so forth for things like the garage floor yet? Or is that, I mean, has that actually made its way out publicly to a Board of Selectmen discussion?
We've not done any of that. And I think Jack's point about moving these appropriations forward quickly, I think makes sense. But we don't want to short circuit our normal process, which is we take a careful look at each one of these bids and we absorb kind of the totality of that to make sure it's done right. But we'll get to this as quickly as possible. But I don't want to, I mean, I would say we shouldn't rush it. Nothing's on fire.
My point is, since this is an advisory committee, and as Dan said, we have no authority.
No, I'm saying we can definitely recommend that.
We recommend it.
I think the Board of Selectmen is going to want to do its usual
review. Then at the Board of Selectmen, they will do their normal review on whatever we put forward on the list, and then move whatever they approve after their normal review forward to the Board of Finance.
Right. So if
that could be 5 out of them, it could be 10 out of them, it can be 0 this month, but it's in then the Board of Selectmen normal process.
I think if you would approve some of these today, we either have we've set the agenda for Tuesday, but we could still we haven't posted it yet, so we could still change it, or the next meeting is August 7th. Some of these we'd like to move quickly on. But I also understand, like the garage, it's a new concept.
Yeah, Kate, I think some of the ones that I think the garage floor we need a little more time on. We can do it at the next meeting, but this is a big meeting coming up, and we're not giving the board enough time to look at this. So my recommendation would be we on something that's brand new, like the floor, a little more time.
Agreed.
But it would be good for this committee to start moving things forward to the Board of Selectmen for them to have that discussion.
Absolutely.
But some of the costs that are already in this year's budget, you guys already reviewed and approved. So moving those forward and just switching it out of the capital account or operations into the ARPA funds is a real low-hanging fruit because you already approved it.
I agree with that, Jack. What are the ones that have been approved as part of the fiscal 24 budget and that are in this spreadsheet?
$95,000 for the post-fly car, $77,500 for the fire marshal vehicle replacement. So the only 2 not approved anywhere else that we're looking at right now is the garage floor and the landscaping at Highland Farms.
So the only 2 that are in the budget are $172,500, you said, right?
Yes.
So, I mean, Jack, does it make sense to get those at least started today?
I would agree with that.
And the other ones that are already in the ARPA fund.
Right, that just need additional funding to move that forward. So just those gets us going, and to raise Dan's point, starts us spending things so that they're committed and they're spent while we're approaching halfway mark.
So then, Jack, on that, you piggybacking on that strategy, let's just say the police department locker room, we do not know the number yet. Could be 100, could be 110, could be 120. But I guess the question is, if the census of this group is that's a line item we could use ARPA funds for, well, then the Board of Finance should make sure that we don't approve it out of our capital contingency fund. Or I guess if we did, I guess question for Jen, if we were to approve 100,000, let's just say that's the number that came forward in the next 1, 2, 3 weeks, could ARPA come back and fund it, and then we just sort of put the money back into the capital reserve? Because we don't want to slow that project down.
We could do that. Another option would be to identify things such as the garage floor, the locker room, if you're comfortable with the retaining wall, and say those are ones that you as a committee would be comfortable funding out of ARPA once we have additional information or the necessary information to go through our normal project review process. So then once it becomes available, we don't have to circle back to the committee, but we can just go right to the Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance.
Yeah, I would agree with that. That was my intention. So I'm never looking to take us out of our normal process, but if we can quickly move those forwards when the estimates are there, then it goes there. And I agree, Jim, to your point, because I know that the intention was, because of speed, to move the police locker room pods out of contingency. As long as we identify that, as soon as that comes in, we can use ARPA and save the contingency for something else down the road.
So maybe, Jack, this sounds like a motion today for 95,000 and for 77,500 for the fly car and for the fire marshal car, and then maybe a bit of a soft circle, if you will, on the amounts that would fund the retaining wall at Neuron Heights and the DPW garage floor once we sort of get some more, color and specifics on those.
If you'd like, let me try and make a motion, and because there were a couple of other things. So if you allow me to read small print over here, I'd motion to move forward the website upgrade for 15,000, the auditorium and meeting room upgrades for 80,000, the joint and mortar repair for 35,000, to use 110,000 for Rinzen Road Bridge repair and Oak Kings Highway South 35. And to add to that, the fly car for Post 53 for 95 and the fire marshal vehicle replacement for 77,500, and move those immediately forward for the approval, recommending the approval by the Board of Selectmen. So that's the first motion.
So with quickly discussion, Jen or
you need
Kate,
a second.
Is that a list? No, I'm asking.
Okay.
Well, I'll second that. Then I have a question, which is that list, does Jack's list match your list?
No. The pod that Kevin brought up earlier needing 18,000 and the paddle court needing an additional 30,000 were not on his list.
Then I would amend to add those two. Yeah.
And I second that. Amended
Thank you,
motion.
Dan.
Amend to remove or amend
to add?
To add.
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Of the amendment?
No, of the motion.
Yeah, well, first we have to do the amendment.
Well,
yes. So first, yeah, we're in favor of the amendment.
Yeah. So, okay. So is there a motion to move the amendment?
Yes. And Dan seconds.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
So I just have a question on what the numbers, since a lot of those things that are in this motion are not part of the spreadsheet. Can somebody go through what those numbers are again? And then are there any of those that we haven't actually seen the details on, or that the details haven't been sort of publicly released, a sketch, a budget, or anything like that?
When you say not in the budget, are you talking about not in the fiscal budget or not in the already in the ARPA? Because all these, as I'm looking at it, all of these things are already either approved projects within the ARPA fund, or they were approved as part of the fiscal 24 budget.
Got it. And can you just run through those again, Jack, just since those...
Hey, can you run through them since I missed two?
Sure. It was the website upgrade for 15,000, auditorium upgrades 80,000, joint and mortar repair 35,000, the fly car 95,000, fire marshal's vehicle, 77,500. The health pod, 18,000, and the paddle courts, 30,000, for a total of 495,500.
Did we include the joint mortar?
Yes.
And the bridges.
The two bridges.
And the two bridges, Rings End Bridge at 110,000, Old Kings Highway South at 35,000. I'm just doing my math again.
How much is that in total?
I'm just doing that again, just to be sure that I did it right the first time. I've got 495,500.
That's what I have too.
Monica, you were going to ask a question?
Yeah, going back to the joint and mortar, how confident are you in that number?
The bids we got was probably like 6 months or so. It was in the mid-80s was the low. So this would cover what, if the bids came in the same neighborhood. And if they don't, I'll be back. Okay, so you have a motion and a second on the floor.
All in favor? Okay.
All right. I'd like to make another motion that the committee recommend the Board of Selectmen consideration the additional landscaping at Highland Farms, the DeRoton Heights Fire Department retaining wall, the gotta go down the line. One other thing here. Oh, the police department locker room and the Department of Public Works garage floor. Are those the ones that we're waiting for the additional stuff right now? All of those are new, so they would need typical things. Does that meet, Kate, what you were thinking?
So are you actually suggesting they just consider? Because I think the discussion before was that, like, if they that you're basically approving the projects in concept.
That the committee believes that ARPA funds could be used for those projects based upon the review of the Board of Selectmen.
Right. So basically you're saying the board
as a funding source.
And then the Board of Selectmen wouldn't have to come back to this committee for those. Got it.
Right.
So Jack, do you want to take a sense of the meeting that we support this, and then we would vote once we actually saw details on these, or no?
No, I don't think we need the details.
I think the idea is to hand it off to the Board of Selectmen now.
Right. We hand it off. This is their, that's, I hate to say their job, but that's their job. They know how to do this. They'll review. And if it comes in a little bit higher, because we're not, then it comes in higher. And then when it comes in higher, it goes to your board, Jim, for the authorization of the appropriation. But this is just a quick handoff so that when they come in, and the timing of it also, some of this may come in September, October, and it will be put on the Board of Selectmen as appropriate. But it doesn't have to come back here.
All right. So do you want to make a motion to recommend that?
He did.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. So, and we have a second. Jim,
yeah.
All in favor? Yeah. Okay.
I have one last recommendation because this drives me nuts when I look at the Board of Finance, areas. But there are several projects that I believe are closed. I'm not talking about the ones that we will eventually move funds from, but unmanned drone for $267. The rescue jacks for $426. The senior tablet loan library for $69. The vaccine clinics for $7,223. The implement health software for $7,995,000.
Not to short circuit you, Jack, but I think as the first.
All I'm saying is that those should be closed down and moved to contingency.
That's fine. I think the urgent thing is to get those other projects in a position where they could get moving forward. I think the next version of this spreadsheet is going to have a reallocation of those funds as well as these funds. And then at our next meeting, we're going to look at that clean reallocation and then make a decision on that rather than do it on the fly here.
Well, and I think, to Jack's point, though, we actually should, like those items, if we just take those items and the ones in Public Works that Ed had said, we can leave in the 250 in the Old Kings Highway South. If we close those out, it makes everything cleaner.
Well, I think that's fine. It's just as a matter of urgency, it didn't need to be done right now. And I kind of like to look at a clean spreadsheet rather than having all these scratch marks like I've got right now that takes all of that and cleanly lays it out so that I've got a clear view of it. If you really have to do it right now, that's okay.
Well, what I'm saying is, with what you've approved to reallocate, there needs to be a source for that. Yeah. So even if you just...
but the closed out projects are not enough to do all that. So we have to do
But that's why I'm saying you need to basically, close out those other ones in order to free up the money to move it around.
Okay, but we're going to, the completed, what I'm saying is the budgets remaining in the completed projects are not enough to fund what we're talking about. So you're going to have to take money out of projects that are not completed.
Correct.
Okay, so.
But Kate, just to go on John's point, I think John's right. The mere fact is that this can just be brought to the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Selectmen can close that out.
Okay. Yep. Okay.
And that way the funds are moved there appropriately and we don't have to do anything about it.
All right. I'm good.
And that also goes to the Board of Finance because they have to move money around and approve.
Right, regular process, you're right.
Yep. Okay, thank you.
All right, friends. Kate or Jen, anything else to cover?
No.
Can I just ask one quick question?
Sure.
Back to the food insecurity and the nonprofits. Like Dan had said, so like Community Fund keeps very clear records of how they spend their money. And one of the other places I was considering was person to person. If they are able to keep very good detailed, tracking of how they're spending the money, is it a possibility, Jen and Kate, that we could still consider?
Yeah, I would say so. Those wouldn't be among the ones I recommend that the Board of Selectmen close out right now. So to give us a little bit more time to consider how to keep that money in the social service or human service area. But the three of us need to commit to working on that. Okay.
Can I make a recommendation before we wrap, Allie, on that point? Could the three of you make a recommendation to this committee when we next meet as to whether we can allocate funds, to whom we can allocate funds within this purpose, and that you are comfortable with the tracking mechanisms that would be required? Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I was going to say that we could check with those organizations and see if they've received other ARPA money from other sources and how that tracking is taking place. So I agree, trying to keep that in that lane is what we should be trying to do.
Or look at other areas within human services purview that we could use the money.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else for the good of the order? Okay. Kate and Jen, thanks very much for pulling all this together, and we'll look to getting a fresh spreadsheet and get the next discussion on the table or on the calendar so we can get all this wrapped up. But really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any motions?
Thank
Have
you.
a good day, everyone.
Take care. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.